ETM Hotel Rennie Sean, welcome in peace. My name is Sean. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into the Kofi Pie Side Research Team. I'm waiting on people to get into the building. Come on in, like the show, share the show, tell a friend and tell a friend. We're actually going to revisit um, Queen Nzinga wholeheartedly. We're not going to cherry pick parts of her life or her career. We're actually going to deal with why we even want to recognize this woman or uh, at all. Um, what's her existence? Um, her involvement in the slave trade. Um, have any of you ever militarily, have even, any of you ever been involved in the military, been to war? If you've ever been to war or have succumbed to a war, whether it's a street war, Iraq, Vietnam, I don't know which wide range of our listening audience will be engaged in this discussion, but have you ever been at war? When you're invaded, when you're surrounded by a stranger that has been in the presence of your country, your nation, since your birth, and you had to succumb to military prowess of these and political prowess of these people, ultimately, what do you do? What are the rules of engagement in a political and economical war? See, many people are under the assumption that they would have did something totally different than Queen Nzinga, but those same people with that type of a mindset hasn't done anything in their own communities. Now, everyone has their opinions and their choice, right? We're making an anti-vaccine statement here by saying I have the choice to say to not celebrate a particular person. You're absolutely correct. You do. You have a choice. Your decision doesn't affect anyone over historical record. But let the record stand that we're going to deal with this thing in pieces. We may even break out Kofi's presentation regarding the conversation. Now, this isn't this, and I'm going to tell y'all this right now. On a scholastic level, this will have nothing to do with the noise. Scholastically, nothing to do with the noise at all. So I see we got some people in the building. Please like the show, share the show, tell a friend and tell a friend that we're in the building. Hopefully, I'll be joined by Brother Chavis, Brother Sutek. I don't know. I don't know their availability. I know they were in on the last one. People may be entertained by the noise. I don't know. But from this point forward in my life, the noise is muted. It's too much racket. I set out to be a science enthusiast, and in my journey of not only being a science enthusiast and a researcher, I've committed to advancing scholarship, advancing knowledge, because that's what science enthusiasts do. That's what researchers do. They advance knowledge. And I made a pledge to honor the historical record and context and do those things to smooth out what is rough and to stand on what has already been sound. So I'm going to review the introduction of Nzinga of Angola, Africa's Warrior Queen, written by Linda M. Heywood. And we're going to hear from the author of this book as she commemorates Queen Nzinga. Now, Queen Nzinga, she was the 17th century ruler of Ndongo, a kingdom in Central Africa that was located in what is now a portion of northern Angola, came to power in Africa through her military prowess, skillful manipulation of religion, successful diplomacy, and remarkable understanding of politics. Despite her outstanding accomplishments and her decades-long reign, comparable to that of Elizabeth I of England, she was vilified by European contemporaries and later writers as uncivilized savage who embodied the worst of womankind. Europeans at the time portrayed her as a bloodthirsty cannibal who thought nothing of murdering babies and slaughtering her enemies. They also charged her with defying gender norms by dressing as a man, leading armies, keeping harems of male and female consorts, and rejecting the female virtues of caring and nurturing. Much later, 18th and 19th century writers who composed fictional accounts about Nzinga depicted her as a degenerated woman driven by unorthodox sexual desires who reveled in barbaric rituals. Nzinga's life was continued to be viewed mostly as a curiosity, but the historical records reveal something different. It was this same Nzinga who conquered the kingdom of Mataba and ruled it together with the remainder of the powerful Ndongo kingdom for 3 decades. Defied 13 Portuguese governors who ruled Angola between 1622 and 1663. 13 Portuguese governors, keeping her kingdom independent in the face of relentless attacks, and made important political alliances not only with several neighboring polities, but with the Dutch West Indian Company. It was this same Nzinga whose religious diplomacy enabled her to make direct contact with the Pope, who accepted her as a Christian ruler and to establish Christianity within her kingdom. Nzinga's story is important on many different levels. On one level, it is a significant chapter in history of resistance to colonialism. Throughout the 400 years of Portuguese occupation of Angola from 1575 to 1975, resistance never stopped. Nzinga's place as the most successful of the African rulers in resisting the Portuguese influenced not only Portuguese colonialism in Angola, but also the politics of liberation and independence in Angola. Nzinga's life and history also had implications for the Americans. Africans captured by the Portuguese or purchased in the region where Nzinga lived and ruled were sent as slaves to Brazil and Spanish America, and were the first Africans to arrive in Northern America colonies. These slaves brought Nzinga's story and memory with them. How many of you have genetic admixture from the Congo? Does your DNA represent someone who was captured and sent from the Congo to North America? I'm curious to see what your DNA says. But Nzinga's life and actions transcend African history and the history of slavery in Africa and the Americas. Her story reveals larger themes of gender, power, religion, leadership, colonialism, and resistance. Books on notable and sometimes notorious female European rulers such as Queen Elizabeth I of England, who ruled 2 decades earlier than Nzinga, and Catherine the Great of Russia, who ruled nearly a century afterward, number in the hundreds. Despite the many parallels, Nzinga shares with these women, no serious biography of her has existed until now in English or in any other language. This book reveals the full and complex life that was Nzinga's, focuses on the themes of power, leadership, gender, and spirituality. So let's set the scene. Now that I have your attention, let's set the scene. Before meeting Nzinga, we need to make the acquaintance of the world she was born in into 1582. Geographically, politically, and socially, prior to Nzinga's rule, Congo, which formed the northern boundary of Ndongo, was the only Central African kingdom known to Europeans. It is there we turn first to understand the region Nzinga would transform in ways that continue to inform not only the history of Angola, but the place of women in the politics in Africa and the world. Historical context is key when you're talking about figures, right? So I want to pose this question to the people. In 100 years, when we're long gone in the graves, we're no longer a physical type. We're just a memory to the children that we left behind and our grandchildren that we left behind. But our grandchildren's grandchildren knows nothing of us. And the story of Martin Luther King comes up on a YouTube platform. And some people begin to challenge Martin Luther King. He was no liberator. He wasn't for his people. He led us astray. He even said that in one of his speeches. He got us in this mess. How dare Martin Luther King claim to liberate us, but send us to our graves? And then he was killed. You see, if you don't put Martin Luther King's story in the context for your children, for your children's children, they one day too will make the same mistake. They will look at him as a fake, a fraud, a phony. They will look at him as a traitor. They will look at him as someone who shouldn't even be remembered. But that is not the case here. See, people have a choice, right? That's what was said today. They have a choice. They can mess up history. They can not provide historical context. They don't care anything about methodology. They can say the things that they can say, and it's their choice. They don't have to honor her or look at her as a liberator or any of those things, right? They can demonize her. Do you still see the local drug dealer who changed his life and began to work in the community to educate other people as still the local drug dealer? In 1483, almost exactly a century before Nzinga's birth, the first Europeans arrived in Central Africa. At a time, the largest kingdom in the region was Congo, covering some 33,000 square miles and stretching nearly 300 miles from the Soyo and the Dandi regions of the Atlantic coast eastward to the Congo River. Congo's northern borders include lands just north of the Congo River, as well as some areas in the southern region of today's Democratic Republic of the Congo. The kingdom's southern frontier included lands between the Bingo and the Dandi rivers. A colony of the Congo citizens also lived far further south on the island of Luanda, where they harvested the Nzumbu shells that were the main currency in the kingdom. Despite its size, the kingdom was sparsely populated, containing only about 350,000 people, largely because its arid and flat western zone was inhospitable. Most of the population was concentrated in and around the capital, Mbanza Congo, now in northern Angola and also known as Sao Salvador, as well as the southwestern provinces. The geographical reach of the kingdom was not the only factor that made it the dominant power in the region. Congo's political organization set it apart from its smaller neighbors as well. The Kingdom of Congo was a centralized polity governed by an elected king chosen from several eligible royal lineages. Once elected, the king had absolutely power. He selected close relatives from his own lineage to serve as his court and as heads of his provinces. Mbanza Congo, where the king's court was located, was the administrative and military center of the kingdom. It was from here that the king sent his court or his standing army to rely his orders or enforce his will in the provinces. Provincial rulers, despite having sizable military forces themselves, had no security of office. And during the early years of the kingdom, kings concentrated enough military force in the capital that they were capable to remove upstart provincial representatives from office and confiscate their goods. The first rulers of the kingdom selected Mbanza Congo as the capital for both strategic and defensive reasons. Situated on a high plateau above the river, the city was well protected and had a good water supply as well as a fertile land for farming in the river valley. Paths connected Mbanza Congo with the capitals in each province and were busy with provincial representatives, advisors, armies, religious personnel, and ordinary people traveling to the capital to attend religious and political ceremonies and pay taxes. These same paths provided access for invading armies. Congo gained additional power as a result of relationship to its king developed with the Portuguese, who first arrived in the Congo coastal province of Soyo in 1483. By 1491, King Nzinga, a Nukwa, and the entire leadership of the kingdom had converted to Catholicism and implemented policies to transform the kingdom into a chief Catholic power in the region. The Congo ruler who did the most to bring about this transformation was King Alfonso, the son of Nzinga Nukwu. During his reign, he engineered the physical altercation of the city and oversaw a religious and cultural revolution that marked Congo as a Christian state. Alfonso sent the children of the elite to be educated in Portugal and other Catholic countries and welcomed Portuguese cultural missions that brought skilled craftsmen who worked alongside the Congolese and built the stone churches that dominate Congo's capital. Alfonso also ordered the construction of schools where elite children studied Latin and Portuguese. Alfonso's plans to transform the kingdom into a Christian state went beyond personal piety, religious scholarship, and the building of churches and schools. A cultural transformation of Congo took root during his long rule as well. See, in Alfonso's Congo, members of the elite adopted titles such as Duke, Marques, and Count. And before long, Portuguese legal processes mixed with Congolese precedents to govern court procedures. Moreover, the religious calendar of the Catholic Church governed Congolese life, and Congolese children from both high and low families learned the catechisms from local Congo teachers, received both Christian and Congolese names, and were baptized. There was always a shortage of priests in the kingdom, but the ambiguous crosses found in the villages throughout Congo and the visits of Congo priests served to remain villagers of their status as Christians. She ain't even born yet. This was all transpiring. We have the Congo overtaken by Portuguese, succumbed to Christianity peacefully. Names change, cultural perspectives, worldview, and ideology, all different. Foreigners have taken over a country in Africa. The cultural transformation of the country and the Christian character of the kingdom were evident to European visitors to Congo long after Alfonso's death. Europeans who met Congolese ambassador Antonio Manuel, Marquis of Ni Vendu, during his travels to Portugal, Spain, and the Vatican from 1604 to 1608 were astonished with his sophistication. They noted that although he had been educated only in Congo, he knew how to read and correspond in Latin and Portuguese, and he spoke these languages as well as he did his native Kikongo. But there was a tragic cost to Alfonso's cultural engineering. Alfonso had to engage both in wars and conquests and in slave trading to fund sustain the project. During Alfonso's rule, the number of people who were captured and brought into the kingdom as slaves or who were condemned to slavery as punishment for their crimes increased exponentially. Now, I want to talk about this point real quick because a lot of people are talking about they just went in and they just hijacked things and or hijacked people and enslaved these people and brought them against their will. But little is left out in context. What about the people who committed crimes against the other people in their communities? We know this as an African worldview. They will give you away in a heartbeat. All the people that committed crimes, anything that went on in the village, if you stole something from somebody, if you did something, you smacked, you did anything. If you went against the village people, they would later, bye-bye, you go first. The trade in slaves led to the expansion of wars to capture slaves, as well as to increase slave trading and slave owning by the Congo elite and their Portuguese partners. Congo kings allowed the Portuguese to engage in slave trading in the kingdom, sent slaves as gifts to the Portuguese kings, and at times called the Portuguese military assistance either to deal with the threats from inside the kingdom or to aid in the expansionists of the slave raiding wars that Congo rulers made against neighboring states, including Ndongo. It was during Alfonso's rule that three distinct social groups with different life prospects emerged in the kingdom. At the top of the Congo society were the kings and the members of the various royal lineages identified by their Portuguese titles as nobles. Members of this group had residences in the capital and made up the council of electors who choose the king and held court positions. The next group was made up of free villages called gente. Below the free villages were slaves or escravos, captives from wars who were held mostly by elite, but were also found in the households of ordinary villagers. Subsequent kings followed the pattern of Alfonso had set. For example, Alfaro I, the king who was ruling Congo when Nzinga was born, expanded the diplomatic and political reach of Congo. He cultivated relations not only with the Portuguese and Spanish courts, but also with the Vatican. Congo had all these connections with other Central African states, such as the Mataba, a kingdom that would figure prominently in Nzinga's life. Mataba was located at the east end of the Congo in Ndongo and extended eastward toward the Congo River in the region known today as Baixa di Kasanji. Very little is known about the early history of the kingdom. Reference to a place called Mataba first appears in a letter of Alfonso and the king in 1530. In the letter, Alfonso noted that he was sending 2 silver manillas that he had received from a nobleman who lived in his lands called Mataba. From that time on, the letters were sent to Portugal. Congo kings always included Mataba in one of the areas of their rule. Other records, however, indicated that Mataba declared itself independent sometimes between 1530 and 61. In 1561, the great queen who ruled Mataba sent one of her sons to the Congo, where he met a Portuguese priest stationed there and told the priest that the queen was sympathetic to Christianity and wanted to open communications with Portugal and become friends with the Portuguese. We do not know what came of this overture, but as we shall see, Mataba later became an important base for Queen Nzinga. Before we go any further, I am joined by Brother Sutek and Brother Chavis. They have gotten on the panel with us. Peace to Ogun Bale. Ogun in the building. What up, what up? Yes, sir. You know we're gonna bring the real sources. Now, I got this real homework, but I also have some other homework, but I don't want to dominate the discussion. I just wanted to set the agenda, right? I just want to set the agenda So we can build. If we want to build, then we can build how we want to build. We're not at anyone else's discretion. But of course, when we're talking about history, we want to provide historical context. We don't want to argue. We don't want to give opinions. We don't want to, catch feelings. We don't want to fall in love with the information. We don't want to be ignorant here because, like I said, in 100 years, Martin Luther King could be seen as what? Wrong. He could be seen as, nah, he wasn't no liberator. He was a punk, a sellout. Man, he led us right into this, man. You mean to tell me he was all about integration? Integration broke black people back. How could he do that to us? How can he make us march all these places and do all these things and succumb to such horrible treatment? Got us sitting in bars, turning our other cheeks while we getting slapped on, spit on, food thrown on us, dogs biting us. We can't sit in the front. We gotta sit in the back. He making us do all these boycotts and sit outs and all of these different things, and then he shows up and garners all the attention. And then we walking from Selma to Montgomery. You know how far Selma from Montgomery is on foot? All for what? Just to be jailed. He was a coon. He was a sellout. This is what they can do when you don't put Martin Luther King in context.
They do that though. They do it now.
So what I want to do, man, is I'm gonna open up the panel for my brothers, and then I'm going to continue, right? But like I said, I'm gonna let the beat build. This ain't gonna be a 8-hour show. This is gonna be in parts because I also want you to hear from the author herself. So, brother Chavis, you got the floor real quick, man. So take chime in. I see what you did over there with your little profile in the background. You know what I'm saying? You think you're slick. You think you're slick, bruh.
Hey, I'm coming up.
Yeah. Look, you think you're slick, bruh. Go ahead, Chavis.
Oh man, I just want to say that you set the context perfectly because a lot of that was missing in a lot of. I didn't watch the full dialogue because I couldn't stomach too much projections and opinions versus actual sources. But what I did get, I seen a lot of lack of context and a lot of projections. So I'm glad you did that. And I just got through watching majority of this lecture, and I'm ready to get to that part because it's some things that was left out that is critical to that discussion, and it's critical to even forming an opinion. But I digress. Go ahead, Sutet.
Yeah, man. All I see is a bunch of emotional rants, and that's cool. I mean, not saying that you don't have. I feel when he say I understand you have the right to be emotional if she had a part or a hand in enslaving of your people. But to say that she was a slaver, like, first of all, I don't even know what that word means. They said it's pseudo killer terminology. It must be because I've never heard of it. But when we try to get context, we slowing it down too much. So I don't know if a slaver is somebody who is heavily involved in slavery, if they trade in slaves, if are you a slaver if you own a couple slaves, if you have house servants, like I don't know. I can't get the context because anytime we try to get context or add context to a conversation, it becomes a problem. And I feel like that's a problem with me because Dr. Maad made a perfect analogy earlier. She said, you could kill somebody and without, I'm paraphrasing, so I might F it up a little bit, but you could kill somebody and it be self-defense, but without that context, you will never get it. Like Kofi saying in the chat, you will never understand. So context is key. We got to put things into historical context, because you can't look at history or a historical situation from the eyes of a 21st century westernized mind. It's not gonna make sense. It's not gonna make sense to you. And then I just feel like it got a little too emotional, because at certain points it's like, bro, just say you don't like this person. What does this person's sexuality have to do with if she was a quote unquote slaver? What does her having side pieces have to do? Like, I've never met I don't understand. Like, people from where I come from we don't shame people off of their sexuality. We don't shame people off of doing things that should be considered human nature. And that's, again, that has absolutely nothing to do with the conversation. So it was a lot of things left out. It was a lot of things not put into its proper context, and therefore you will be lost in the situation. And I'll pause right there.
What you got, Chav? Anything else?
Nah, nothing outside of. I just thought it was interesting. Just like I said, we gonna watch it, but if once we get to that point, it's interesting the stuff that you hear and how similar it is to what I heard on the discussion. So I'm just leave that jewel for people to just keep in mind as the show rolls.
All right, thank y'all. So, the Kingdom of Ndongo. At the time of the Portuguese arrival in the Congo, Ndongo was the second largest state in Central Africa, having an area about 1/3 that of Congo. It encompassed what are today the provinces of Kwanza Norte, Kwanza Sul, Malenge, and Bingo in modern Angola. Angola derives its name from the word Angola, the title of the ruler of Ndongo. Ndongo bordered the Atlantic Ocean and extended from the frontier with Congo at the outlet of the Bingo River, south to the bay where the mighty Kwanza River empties into the ocean. Ndongo's northern boundary wound its way eastward from the Atlantic through the Dimbos region and the lands bordering Congo's southern provinces, such as Mbwele, until it reached the Lukala River. The southern boundary followed the Kwanza River, some 170 miles inland, including lands on both sides of the river, until it reached a series of large rock formations at Pungo and Ndongo, located a few miles north of the river. Ndongo's eastern boundary began some miles beyond Pungo and Ndongo and included lands to the south as far as Kuta River. The eastern boundary continued in northeasterly direction following the Lukala River to the border of Congo. Unlike Congo and Ndongo had a few rivers that were navigatable over many miles, but many also had treacherous falls and whirlpools. The Kwanza River, see, this is key. You need to understand what's going on here, because this is what made the Congo dominant. But many also had treacherous falls and whirlpools. The Kwanza River, the main waterway that led to the center of the kingdom, was navigatable by small boats, navigable by small boats for some 125 miles inland. But at the point of the Kambambe waterfall, 70 feet high, made such navigations impossible. An even larger waterfall further upstream imposed an additional barrier, the Lukala River, the other main watercourse in the kingdom of the tributary of Kwanzaa, though navigable in some parts, has even more spectacular waterfalls, also preventing full use for river transport. The most impressive of these waterfalls toured from the spectacular height of 300 feet in an area studded with tall trees and dense underbush. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Now, but the rivers were not as challenging to the local Mbandu population as they would be to the Portuguese who arrived in 1575. People used canoes that were easy to navigate over rapids and shallows. The upper reaches of Kwanzaa River contained a collection of large lands and Ndongo Islands that were economically and strategically significant. They provided excellent fishing grounds. And also, they supported the villages and agriculture. A few exclusive use of the rulers was one of the royal capitals, while others was the site of the tombs of Ndongo rulers and members of the ruling lineages. This island were also strategically located. They were close enough together that soldiers or spies could easily move between them, and during combat, soldiers posted on the low-lying hills could launch arrows against opposing armies, approaching canoes while still protecting themselves. In addition, since the inlands were not far from the banks, the ruler feared being attacked at the capital could easily relocate the court to the islands and continue to conduct war, send out diplomatic missions, manage other state affairs, as Nzinga would do on several occasions. Finally, if all else failed, leaders and soldiers could escape by canoes to move from island to island undetected until they reached safety on the opposite side of the river. Just as they found ways to make use of the rivers, Mbandu people had been able to exploit the land resources and collect all parts of the country. The people had adapted to the climate that ranged from semi-arid conditions to the coast, to cool and even frosty conditions in the plateau region, to humid and tropical conditions in the valleys and the savannas. In the low-lying coastal areas, South Luanda, including the Kisama climate and the semi-arid, is inhospitable. Here, however, the majestic and imposing Mbandero, the baobab tree, was the lifeline of the local population, providing water, food, shelter, and medicine. The Kasima region was famous for large slabs of rock salt, which were mined and distributed to all parts of the country. The climate and resources of the plateau regions in the interior of Ndongo differed drastically from the dry coastal areas. The many rivers that flowed down from high mountains into the meadows and valleys provided abundant water for the fertile fields where people grew a range of tropical crops, pastures, and raised domestic animals, including cattle, goats, pigs, and fowl. The distribution of resources in Ndongo informed political structure. The kingdom was divided into 17 provinces that incorporated 736 territorial divisions called Morindas. Kabasa, 160 miles from the coast, was the official residence of the Angola, along with his wives, children, and relatives connected by descent and marriage. The first Portuguese delegation to visit the capital in 1560 described the ruler at the time as having more than 70 children and as many as 400 wives and concubines. The chief wife ran the household and ensured that the slaves, serfs, and free people living within the walls of the household carried the goods they produced to the daily market and bought the supplies the household members needed. Competition in the court between different factions was intense because relatives of several different lineages related to past Angolas also lived in the capital or in the communities surrounding it. Besides the political power of Angola had in Kabasa and the smaller province capitals, he also controlled some state lands and the residents who lived in them. The people who lived on these lands occupied three different legal categories. You had free people, serfs, and slaves. The free people comprised the bulk of the population and formed the peasantry. The status of the serfs was similar to that of the counterparts in Europe. They worked in the lands of the Angola, and he could not force them off the land or sell them, since the land was held by the royal lineage. The slaves were either war captives or foreigners, and the Angola had the right to sell or remove slaves from the Mirandes in the capital and surrounding areas because he owned them directly. Outside of the capital, the Makatos had political, economic, and spiritual authority that was similar to that of the Angola. These Makatos had their own system of hierarchy in their territories, and some of them were quite autonomous. Their status heads of the Mirandes derived not from being sent from the capital to be Angola's representative in an area, but in the fact that they could claim descent from the oldest lineages that occupied the area. Excuse me. Women connected to Angola's household did not participate in battle. A trusted general would protect the secret locations where they were housed. Local priests also performed rituals such as placing skulls and other sacred items on the landscape to intimidate the enemies. But the main military tools of the Ndongo soldiers were spears, poison arrows, and battle axes they were known for. This is key. The military that the Ndongo had, this is their weaponry. The Portuguese is there. The Portuguese got guns. But all they got is spears, axes, poison arrows. That's all they got. Apart from Angola's military strength, he also wielded legal authority in Ndongo through agents who traveled throughout the kingdom to make sure the people obeyed the laws. The agents paid special attention to transactions regarding the sale of captives, slaves, to make sure the exchange rate of the various items people used as money was regulated and remained stable. The economic system that undergirded Ndongo society was based on an extensive system of local, regional, and central markets. Apart from the markets that each Miranda held regularly, the provincial and central markets brought natural and manufactured products from all over the country together into one place. Slave holding and slave trading were vital parts of the economy of Ndongo. Slaves were often acquired during successful military excursions. They also came from the ranks of free villages who were condemned by judges for religious infractions or civil disobedience, such as treason and adultery, especially if the latter included any of the Angola numerous wives. In such adultery cases, all members of the lineage in that particular generation might be condemned to slavery. The more common means of acquiring slaves, however, was from captives taken in wars against provincial rulers or neighboring kingdoms. The captives were available for purchase at the provincial and central markets. The trade was highly regulated, and purchasing slaves was a protracted operation. In the markets in Kabasa, the Angola agents were required to oversee each slave transaction to make sure that the sale was a legitimate one in an effort to prevent unscrupulous trade in conquitos. Now, Ndongo law regarded the conquitos as serfs, individuals who were tied to the land but were not slaves. In addition to the slave trade, the Angola gained resources through a system of tribute contributed by the provinces of the Mirandes. Although some of the Angola's legitimacy was based on being a member of a ruling lineage, as well as his ability to command military forces to victory and accumulate economic resources, much rested on the spiritual position he occupied in Ubuntu society. Ndongo tradition attributed the founding of the state to a skilled blacksmith from Congo who was believed to be able to speak to God and name Zapongu or Zambu. People greatly respected the kings and religious authorities because they believed they were possessed by special powers. Excuse me. The official religious authority at the court of Kambasa was a very important figure. One of the Portuguese Jesuits who visited the court of the Ndongo king in 1560 recalled that Angola had sent his court religious official, accompanied by many people, to greet the visitors and look after their welfare as the embassy neared the court. This official consistently refused to listen to the attempts of one of the priests, the Father Gouvert, to tell him about Christianity. He adamantly insisted that God was his master and that he was the best religious practitioner in the whole Ndongo. Portuguese also reported that the Angola was venerated and that the founding ruler of instituted new rituals, including creating a religious group called Exugalas, who could become possessed in spirits and were supposed to be able to create rain. All right, that's a little bit about him. Now let's move forward and let's get directly into Nzinga's birth. But before we do, I want to open the floor up for my brothers again, Sutek and Chavez, and see if y'all have anything that y'all want to add to the bill. Unmute yourselves.
That was again just more context in regards to who got enslaved, quote unquote, and how and why. So, like I say, I didn't watch the whole thing, but from what I did watch, I ain't hear none of that. I didn't hear that the slaves were foreigners, or you know what I'm saying, people that basically, you know, you messed up. You wasn't following the social norms of other people, and there was consequences behind it. But again, you're doing another excellent job on the context. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, man. I'll say. I think Brother Unc had a great point earlier. She does not go down in history as a slaver. Again, whatever that means. She does not go down in history this way. She goes down in history as the opposite, fighting against the slave trade, resisting the Portuguese, trying to save her people. And when you hear people saying she sold her own people, and then you can turn around and tell me context is not as important as we making it, it's a disconnect. If I just asked a question in the chat. If I was homeless and I stole food, now you don't even know what it is. If I'm homeless, me and my family, and I stole out the store, does that make me a thief? You might say yeah, but within context, I say I have my family with me. We have nothing to eat. We have nowhere to go, and we're about to starve. So it goes from you coming to your own assumptions and your own feelings because there's blank spots within my story that need to be filled in with context. If I shot 5 motherfuckers, would you say I'm a killer? You probably would if that's just the story. But what if I told you them 5 motherfuckers was coming in to kill me and 100 of my family members that I have in here with me? So again, context is key. And I don't get, I really don't understand the pushback about that. Um, if you get that context, you will have a different outlook. And maybe it's because you will have a different outlook and you will be forced to look at the narrative in a different way. Maybe this is the reason why there's the pushback. But that's an assumption. But continue.
In 1560, 2 decades before Nzinga's birth, the first outsider provided a description of the Angola and his role as chief lawgiver. The report noted throughout Ndongo, the people fear the ruler, but they nevertheless preferred to make their way to his capital when seeking justice because he does great justice on them, and there is no day that he does not order justice. From some time before 1518 until 1582, when Nzinga was born, the four Angolas who ruled in Ndongo were all men. In 1624, the Nzinga became ruler of Ndongo at the age of 42. She was the first woman to rule. Women, however, played a powerful role at court, and Nzinga would have heard many stories about them as a child growing up in the court of her father, Mbande Angola. Women of the elite class were often in the inner circle privy to the world of men. And Nzinga herself claimed to have sat in on her father's council when she was just a child. One woman who figured prominently in those stories was Horia Angola. She was one of two daughters of the earliest founder of Ndongo. Zundu, the other daughter, murdered Horia's son and then used Jill to secure the throne. She herself was murdered at the instigation of Hohoria, who was seeking to avenge the killing of her son. The story captivated European missionaries decades later when Nzinga elderly contemporaries shared it with them. It spoke to a still emerging Mbondu system of governance that from its inception included women, but also supported a political ideology that tolerated usurpation and murder, fratricide, infecticide, materialistic expansion, and complicated political alliances. When you talk about usurping, you see this wholeheartedly in numerous West African countries. They call Mansa Musa a usurper. Just to be more specific, his lineage is all out of whack. There's no way he could come to the throne outside of what he actually he partake in. But if you don't read Spiritual Combat, you wouldn't know that. Women were important players in Ndongo's founding traditions, and they figured prominently in written accounts of European eyewitnesses in the contact with Ndongo rulers from the 1560s on. I will name another usurper pretty much, Askia Muhammad. It is significant that Hohoria was identified by name as the legal wife of Ngola Kalonje Kisamba, the first historical king of Ndongo. And that is where their son who inherited the kingdom after his father's death. Although Ngola Kalonje Kisamba had several concubines whose children founded the numerous royal lineages that competed with the descendants of Hohoria for leadership of Ndongo, these women remained nameless. In later years, as the kingdom expanded, as the Ndongo faced Portuguese military incursions, okay? In later years, as the kingdom expanded and as Ndongo faced Portuguese military incursions, elite women were often privy to state information. That is evident in the story about a daughter of Angola Kalenji, Kia Ndambi, who learned that her father planned to kill the members of the first Portuguese mission in Ndongo. Y'all didn't know that. Now you know. There was a mission to kill the Portuguese. This news was far more than mere political intrigue for the young woman. The head of the mission, Paulo Dias de Noves, was reputed to be her lover. Although this story may not be true, it does reveal much about women's role at the time. The young woman supposedly revealed her father's plot immediately to Diaz Noves and spirited him in the party of the country, sparing them her father's wrath and certain death. The Angola's daughter would never have been able to orchestrate her lover's escape without unrefited access to goings on in her father's court. Other accounts also detail the crucial yet more traditional part that women played in the religious life of Ndongo society. In 1585, Angola's Kilambe Kia Kasinde is said to have paused just before launching an attack across the Lukala River, ordering his mother and many male and female religious practitioners to perform rituals that would give his army protection. Apart from religious roles, women attached to high status men often occupied their husbands to major public events, as was the case recorded that same year when a lord of Ndongo took with him 500 and more women, all dressed in rich headdresses of Portugal, as he ventured out in public. Despite what it might look like to our modern eyes, the presence of large numbers of women attached to a single man did not mean that women occupied a subordinate position. One of the earliest eyewitnesses reports regarding the status of ordinary women in Ndongo society noted that a woman kept her independence even when she lived in a household with hundreds of other women. Both the chief wife and the concubines were free to leave the arrangement at any time they wished. A woman who left her husband was not ostracized or even reprimanded, but was instead welcomed back into her father's lineage, where she was free to stay until she chose another husband or partner. Interestingly, such a woman might have spent her entire childhood in the household of her future husband. At the first relationship would have resembled that of a playmate or a sibling. Under Ndongo custom, families could send their daughters to the household of the king or another prominent man while still being carried in the mother's arms. To be reared alongside the chosen son, when the son reached marrying age, he would set up his household, selecting one of his favorite female children companions and his chief wife. Positions of women were changeable, and a chief wife would be replaced at a husband's whim, either from the pool of concubines already in the house or from another noble household. Young girls were sent to the king's household all the time. Nzinga's own mother, Kingala Ka Nkombi, was sent as a gift to a man who would father Nzinga, Mbandi A Ngola, the king of Ndongo. Mbandi A Ngola was already married when he made Kangala, his principal concubine, a status just below that of his chief wife. He would father Nzinga and three other children by her. We're going to hear about these children. But first, we turn to Nzinga predecessors and the events that occurred in the decades before her death. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to do something special. And I don't know how many people are aware of this or not, but we're going to do something special. All right, so let me cook.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Spangler, and on behalf of the 2019 Commemoration, American Evolution, Virginia to America 1619 to 2019, and the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to the Jamestown Settlement for this Black History Month event. I would like to ask if you would please silence your phones for the next hour and relax. We have a great event for you. I would like to offer a special welcome to the Honorable Nancy Rodriguez, who is Secretary of the Commonwealth. Thank you so much, Nancy, for being here. And I'd also like to recognize Ray Arroyo of Dominion Resources. I'm not sure Ray is here. He's on the list to attend. I'd also like to recognize some members of the 2019 Steering Committee that are here. Glenn Oder and Terry Brown, members of the First Africans to English North America Committee, Dr. Kalita Fairfax, who I believe just stepped outside, Dr. Tom Davidson, and Terry and Glenn, and then also from our Impacted Women Committee, the Honorable Viola Baskerville. We're really excited to have everyone here. We're very excited to have Dr. Linda Heywood with us this evening to speak about her new book, Njinga of Angola, Africa's Warrior Queen. During the next 3 years, the Commonwealth of Virginia will commemorate the 400th anniversary of key events that occurred in 1619 that helped shape this country, including the arrival of the first recorded Africans to English North America. With her new book, Dr. Haywood has brought into focus intriguing and important backstory for those first Africans who arrived off Old Point Comfort, now Hampton, in August 1619. The 2019 commemoration will also recognize the first representative legislative assembly in the New World, the recruitment of English women to stabilize the colony, and the first official English Thanksgiving in North America. And through it all, we'll recognize the entrepreneurialism and innovative spirit of Virginia through 4 centuries. We're grateful to the Virginia General Assembly for their support and to Dominion Resources, who is our founding corporate partner, and Altria, our Virginia colony partner, for supporting the commemoration. Next week, we will launch our first social media campaign, which will stretch from March, which is Women's History Month, to Mother's Day, May 14th. During the campaign, we will build awareness of one of the commemoration's designated legacy projects, the Women's Monument on Capitol Square in Richmond. This project is being led by the Virginia Women's Commission and the Virginia Capital Foundation and showcases leading women in Virginia's history. This monument will be the first of its kind on state capitol grounds anywhere in the nation. And we're going to need you to help make this a reality. As part of the March to Mother's Day campaign, we're encouraging everyone to make a donation in honor of a special woman in your life. Together, we will make this monument a tribute to our history and an inspiration for current and future generations of women who strive for great achievements. I encourage you to learn more about the March to Mother's Day campaign, the Women's Monument Legacy Effort, and the 2019 commemoration by visiting our displays out in the rotunda following the lecture. Please join us as we build the American evolution. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for the evening. Linda Heywood is a professor of African history, the history of African diaspora, and African American studies at Boston University. She is the author of Contested Power in Angola, editor of and contributor to Central Africans' Cultural Transformations in the American Diaspora, and co-author with John Thornton of Central Africans, Atlantic Creoles, and the Foundation of America, which was the winner of the 2008 Melville Herskovits Award for the Best Book in African Studies. Dr. Heywood's articles on Angola and the African diaspora have appeared in numerous journals, including the Journal of African History. She has served as a consultant for exhibitions at museums across the country, including the Smithsonian Institution, the Fraser History Museum, and right here at Jamestown Settlement. She has also consulted and has appeared, She has also consulted and has appeared on numerous PBS publications, including Henry Louis Gates' PBS series, African American Lives, and the African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross. And she is presently a consultant on Henry Louis Gates's new PBS series, African Civilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Linda Heywood.
Thank you so much for coming. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Anne Berry of the Education Programs of the 2019 Commemoration Committee. I like this title, American Evolution, Virginia to America, 1619 to 2019. I really like that focus because I always tell my students when I'm teaching that what I'm doing is that I'm looking at African American history and I'm looking at Africans as they became Americans. So this title is really apropos. I also like, and I like the subtitle to that title, Democracy, Diversity, Opportunity, because that's what America offered me. I'm not originally from North America, but I'm sure some of my cousins came up here whilst another cousin or sister went to the Caribbean. But I've been here since 1969, and there's everything about diversity. There's everything about democracy, and there's so much about opportunity. So I think I'm just honored, and I just feel sort of overwhelmed to know that I'm here speaking to you all. So I hope you can follow me in this overview of the book that I've written. I'm not going to repeat the book. I'm going to take a particular orientation. I have titled my presentation Njinga, Virginia, of Angola. In fact, she might be of Virginia. Reflections on gender, leadership, and the place of women in politics. Okay, I wanted to start off with the sort of, everybody wants to know, is this a real woman? Yes, she was real. We know when she was born. We know, the Antonio Cavazzi, who was a Capuchin missionary in her court. Cavazzi, as well as Antonio Gaeta, another missionary, they were the first to really give us some insights about Njinga's early life. And they told you, look, we spoke to old people in Njinga's court. And this is what they told us about her birth and about her life as a young woman at court. At the same time that the Portuguese were fighting her father, her grandfather from Njinga's birth. She lived in a world, topsy-turvy world, where war, movement, and survival was part of the reality of the Ndongo people. So I just wanted to place her in context.
No.
We
Pause
know
that.
she died at age 8.
Yeah.
She just reiterated everything you just laid out. If everybody was paying attention, she's doing basically the same thing Sean just did. She's laying this out. But go ahead. I just want to just state that. She just basically said the same thing you just said.
All right.
One that in fact we have a description, and when you read the book you'll see I try to find out exactly what she died from, because Cavazzi described all the changes in her physical deterioration as she went to her death. And I sent that information to 2 young medical doctors who in fact gave me a diagnosis. You'll see that in the book. I also wanted to make sure that some of the things that I was reading from Cavazzi and Gaeta were true. So I always checked it against the Portuguese documentation. Njinga is one of those persons that had much more written about during her life. She wrote letters. People who were fighting against her wrote documents about Njinga. She comes up with more than 10,000 references to this person. In fact, she outlived 10 Portuguese governors. So you can go to Lisbon you can go to Lisbon and find everything about Njinga. She wrote to the Vatican. So we have letters. If you see it in the book, there's a copy of a letter from Pope Alexander VII. So this is a real person. She was real because she wanted to make sure that she kept control of her kingdom. She was also a royalist, so I must tell you, we're not looking at some popular uprising here. She wanted to maintain control because she inherited the throne from a long line of rulers, and the inheritance came through that family. And she always insisted that she wanted someone from her line to rule. So this is an elite. This is a royalist. This is not your ordinary person. During Njinga's time, Angola, even before her birth, this country, which became Angola, sent the largest numbers of Africans into the Americas between a certain time. That's between 1580 and 1640. The majority of the enslaved Africans who came to the Americas were from Njinga's people, the Kimbundu people of Angola. There were people coming from West Africa as well. They were earlier, but during that time when the Portuguese and the Spanish crown joined, 1580 to 1640, Angola was the source of all the enslaved Africans. That is why the 20 and odd Neggers arrived in Virginia. They came from Njinga's people. In the book, I try to reconstruct what Njinga first appears as in a descriptive account of the Portuguese in 1622, when she came to Luanda, the capital of Angola, to in fact have negotiations with the Portuguese, asking them to remove a fort that they had built right next to the capital of the kingdom. Her brother had tried. Her grandfather had negotiations. Sometimes they were on good terms with the Portuguese, sometimes not. And Njinga arrived. She had been estranged from her brother. So we think that her brother had to really offer her a lot to encourage her to come back to the court and be his representative to the Portuguese. And in fact, in the descriptions of that, we know that Njinga, in fact, told him that she had to get the type of attendance she wanted, the type of outfit, all the things. So she comes into Luanda really as a representative of her people and of her kingdom. So this is what that area of Angola would have looked at. This is the Portuguese area, and Njinga's kingdom, Ndongo, had once claimed a lot of this territory. We know that there were tributes. She was her grandfather and great-grandparents and other kings were receiving tribute from people outside of Ndongo. This is Ndongo in 1622. The Portuguese had actually captured most of this land along the Kwanza River. That's Njinga's, that was part of the kingdom of Ndongo. After Njinga was thrown out of the kingdom in 1626, she actually moved into other areas, and this is what her kingdom looked like in 1663 at the time of her death. So I have in the book, I have historical maps that in fact show you the exact way in which Njinga, sometimes she's nearer, she lives in camps sometimes, and she is in the Portuguese area, and there were lots of wars that she conducted against the Portuguese. When the Dutch came and took over Luanda or Angola between 1641 and 1648, Njinga made sure that she had her troops allied with the Dutch. So this is
why historical context is important, because what's left out of the whole conversations is this woman's warring with people who's been there since before she was born. She trying to get rid of the Portuguese. She doing everything that she can to get rid of the Portuguese. You just heard Dr. Heywood say that she conducted numerous wars against the Portuguese. They built the fort too close to the capital. It was disrespectful. She felt disrespected. She already didn't want them there, but she felt disrespected. And the move that they made, it was on the right. So when the Dutch came, because the Dutch, they followed in the same footsteps as the Portuguese. But if you just look at, let me just use Elmina as a parallel. Let me use Elmina as a parallel. How many times? All right, I think this chat should be smart enough to know. If you don't know, then you could you could ask, and we can give you further clarity. But what I'm trying to give you here is this: with Elmina, right? Elmina was a trading port built off the coast lines, right? It was built off the coastlines. Now, Elmina changed hands between the Portuguese, the Dutch, and everybody else. Why? What was so important there that it had to change hands? It was easy access for them to conduct trade and do their business and things of that nature. So the Dutch and the Portuguese was at war no matter where it was in this path around the continent as it's being carved up. The Portuguese had settled in the Congo. They had worked themselves in a way of being able to dominate trade and control certain things in the area. They had imposed Christianity on the people willingly, and they had set up shop to do whatever it is. So when the Dutch came in and they noticed that the Portuguese was already there, they knew the Portuguese was up to no good because of what been going on with the Portuguese from the jump. The Portuguese never told anyone else about what was going on. They tried to hide it all for themselves. So they figure resources. We need to control the resources in the area. So we need to go to war. But let's just see. All I'm trying to get y'all to see is Elmina had the same experience that Queen Nzinga is having, because the locals at Elmina, they were in the middle of certain stuff and they didn't like certain people there either. So they would align with whoever was going to fight whoever. But people don't talk about that. Let's go, Dr. Haywood.
Person who entered European politics so that she can survive and maintain control of the kingdom. Here's Njinga. Some of you may have seen this famous picture because it's described. Njinga comes into Luanda and she, as a representative of her brother, and the Portuguese governor sits on a stool, a seat higher than Njinga, and Njinga, he indicated to Njinga that she should sit on this carpet as Africans who had been conquered were wont to do. Njinga refused to sit, and she called one of her servants and negotiated by sitting at the, on the back, and we can say, oh, how cruel. And you're amazed that someone would think about that. But Njinga's strategy was not to let the Portuguese think that they was dealing with an African who had been conquered. So when she left the audience, she left the servant kneeling. So the Portuguese government.
Hold up, before I let her go too far. She really ain't kneeling among the Portuguese. She's sitting on the back of somebody. But I want to show y'all the image. Let me see if I can get a better image of this somewhere else. Yeah, I know I passed it, but I'm just trying to look to see if I can get a better image. So let me see. This is what she is referring to here. She called someone to come sit down, and then she sat on their backs. They told her to come and lay down in front of them, and there you have a defiant queen.
And his, assistant said, "You're not going to take your chair." She turns around and said, "I have many more chairs from where I come from. Here's it. That's it. You know, when the Portuguese asked her for tribute, she said, "Look, man, I'm here to negotiate as an independent representative of an independent country. I can offer you a gift. Okay? If you want to exchange gifts, that's of equals. But you don't act equals for paying tribute, you see? It is not convenient that an ambassador of her kingdom should sit for the second time in the same seat. Okay? She has other chairs. She could only be placed on a nation, right? Tribute could only be placed on a nation that has been conquered, not one, right? Not on one that spontaneously offered friendship. And this is how the Portuguese, these are male governors. And I'm not saying there's a gender right now, but I'm just saying that the Portuguese couldn't understand because in their world, women did not speak back, especially African women who had been slaves in this colony that they had settled, established in Angola. The Reino de Angola is called, right? One of the other things that Njinga did was that Njinga actually, I think it was a strategic move. The Portuguese, when they conquered Africans, insisted that, in fact, there were Jesuits who went along with the army and that they should be converted. And Njinga, when she was in Luanda, she was about to leave and she was convinced, and I think she was planning that she would, in fact, convert. I think it was a strategic conversion if you follow her life afterwards. So she, for 6 months, she remains in Luanda and learns the catechism and learns all the, prepares herself for baptism. And then goes back to Ndongo. And according to Kavasi, and again, Kavasi maybe is making this up. I don't think so, because when I study her life, it fits a pattern of strategically appropriating elements of European culture, her own culture, spirituality, to make her to survive. So she leaves Luanda as soon as she enters the border between Luanda, which is the Portuguese area, the Reino de Angola, and Ndongo. Guess what she does? She calls her own servants and priests who had accompanied her and brings out all her ritual objects to protect her as she goes back into so-called Umato, the bush, as the Portuguese will call it. So Njinga.
I heard that before, right? Anytime that Arabs and Europeans wrote about Africans in history, they would always refer to them going into the bush as a means of them dealing with their traditional beliefs and systems, right? Not succumbing to their the missionaries or their invaders' religious beliefs, that they would go to the bush to summon their ancestors or conjure up spirits, right? In time of need.
I tried to tell that to them boys too, but they weren't trying to hear that either. I'm like, yeah, you call these kingdoms Islamic. We can say that, but on the real, it's something different. Like, they don't be want to hear none of the context we got to add though. Go ahead.
So what I want to do right here is I want to pause this because, like I said, I want to slow walk, and I don't want to draw it out. I want to make it consumable. I want you to understand that there is steps in research methodology that requires you to know the author, right? Let me pull it back up. Historical context. Definition. Historical context is the social, political, cultural, economic, and environmental situations that influence the events of trends we see happen during that time. Therefore, if we are unfamiliar with the traditions, culture, thinking, or of events happening at a time in history, we could misinterpret or lose the meaning of a piece of writing we are reading. Effective
Wow.
ways to consider historical context in writing is to ask the following questions. Go ahead.
No, it's just it's sad that we have to do this. But go ahead, man. This everything you said was basically what like all this stuff is very, very, very vital to what the subject matter. And it's crazy how it just gets glossed over like that.
Who is the author? When was it written? Are there any references or languages you don't understand? Could they be specific to the time period? Were there any religious, cultural, political, or economic events happening at the time they could have influenced the writer and their piece? So, if we really want to deal with this, we could deal with this, but we have to do it in a manner that we add historical context and we have the conversation properly. But if we just on the street corner among our friends and we just talking junk to one another, then the conversation is warranted in the manner of that which is merely unreliable in a realm or an era of a people that claims to source up or shut up. There's been a lack of sources regarding these claims that have been heralded toward the continent of Africa. From slavery to now Nzinga. And in the future, there will be more. They say the Masi. But if you don't provide the context, then why are we even entertaining or engaging in the ignorance? It's too much noise. Too much back and forth. For what? You read an article. We're reading books. You watched the YouTube video. That still ain't got nothing to do with the research. You got to go beyond that. You can't stop there. Who is the author? They never told us who the author was. They pull up a link and read off the link and never tell you who wrote it. They don't pull the people up, identify the people, and then give it the context. How dare we accept that in an era where we're trying to advance knowledge? Scholarship is on the hinges of, well, I say the fragile hinges of people who claim to be pseudo killers.
Hey, you can't tell them how to research.
Exactly. I was told that.
You know what I'm saying?
I was told that. I can't tell people how to research.
What to talk about. They can talk about it if they want to.
That's
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But on their show, what they did, it was a comment that I recognized. It was saying that her people viewed her a certain way and that she was a tyrant. And if you watch that lecture, I don't know if we got there yet. That wasn't her people.
Yeah, that's bullshit. They was reading from the Portuguese. They reading what the Portuguese is writing. So, and they're echoing every sentiment that these Portuguese are.
Ain't nobody calling you dumb. Get out of here with that.
She masculine. You know what I'm saying? She was
Trying
a
to be slick.
tyrant. Like all this language, the specific language even comes from the worldview of the Portuguese. So it's just crazy to me.
And then
Yeah, the insults about her are from Eurocentric worldview. Those insults, they're not internal.
Those were quotes. Those were documented quotes insults by Europeans that they was parroting.
Shout out to the British. Remember the shout out to the British.
Oh
Remember that
man,
the British.
man,
We should
Can't
They
thank the
heroes.
British. They're heroes.
Council Queen Nzinga, big ups Britain. They abolished slavery. That's what was said.
How you abolish something that you still had people involved in? Most of those slave ships in the illegal slave trade era were British.
We speak English, right? How did that
Boys
happen?
wankers.
How are we?
I guess y'all didn't. I guess y'all didn't know the ships, the ship names, or the involvement of the people, the chroniclers, and so forth that actually was on those ships. See, when you create an economy for bodies, because it wasn't bodies at first, but once you create a need for bodies, you now have control once you learned how to manipulate them through trade. See, the first trade was a manipulation. Many people don't even talk about this. So I'm going to give it to you right now, rugged and raw. The very first early trade between the Portuguese and Africans off the coastal line involved in an amount of gold and some little fake fancy something that was sold. They knew then that what they want, if they didn't touch what they wanted, that the Africans would bring back more of what it was until you took the amount. So if you didn't accept the initial amount that was given, they would give you more. And if you picked that up, then that was enough for whatever it is that you traded for. Once they figured that out, they would go and give something of lesser value and then sit back. And if a day go by, that doesn't get touched. Because remember, I told y'all this on another show that Africans would leave your stuff alone. If it belonged to a foreigner, they would not touch it at all. Someone else would have to come and get it. That is a hire, or someone in that lineage would have to come and claim that. I did that on the previous show. However, if it would just stay there, and then they would come out the next day to see if you claimed it. If you didn't claim it, then they would provide you more of that. If you didn't claim that again, then they would give you more of that. They knew how to manipulate trade. Now, I'm going to take it a step further. Who do you think manipulated Africans first when it came to trade? The Arabs. The greatest example of that is the one person that everybody talks about, Mansa Musa. He came and devalued gold, but he was splurging so much on things in Egypt that had no value that when he went to go sell it back to the people, he didn't even get what he paid for it. He got way less. That was the ignorance. That was the ignorance of not understanding.
Don't let him off the hook.
No, I ain't letting him off the hook.
He was in debt.
Yeah, he was. No. I ain't. No, that has nothing to do with it. Listen to what I'm saying. All that is true, but he didn't know the value of what he was buying.
All right.
That's where I'm staying with. Once I show you that you don't understand the value, then I can sell you whatever I want to sell you.
Yeah, they was taxing
as I want to.
When he went to Egypt.
Correct.
They said it. They said he paying this much for shirts and stuff that's this much. Like, dude, crazy, we getting that bag out of him.
Right. And there go the word in the chat, because we talked about it on the last show. Silent trade. Remember, they kept the Europeans at bay. They didn't want the Europeans seeing where they were getting the gold from. It was a silent trade. Just like the Arabs, they kept them at bay. They didn't want them to know where the gold was coming from. We're giving you historical context. We're giving you historical accounts. We're giving you examples of this taking place in all parts of the continent. And here we have it. We have overgeneralization, emotionalism, appeal to emotions. So many logical fallacies is unheard of. And then the claims of someone else moving the goalpost when only the loudest people are the barbershop psychologists.
He said barbershop psychology.
So if we can't show a proper methodology in this discussion, then it can't be held accurately among the people. But we have people that love to be entertained by it, so they let it slide. They don't know. And like Nunu said, it's some stuff that she just doesn't know, so she's learning. But look at the way she's having to learn. The environment that we set up for people who don't know, and then they have to learn in the don't know in that environment. It's
They got to
shameful.
watch 8 hours of nonsense and then wait till Sean hit the live button and learn something for like an hour and a half. That's crazy.
But we're going to continue discussion on Queen Nzinga. We're going to get into chapter 1, and we will get into more of the lecture as well. We're going to compile the historical context to this conversation, and just like her, we will get into many people that was involved. I have no problem with the involvement. I never denied or denounced African involvement in the transatlantic or trans-Saharan. But
Nobody did, bro. We all went over there.
what people leave
Exactly.
out is the fact that these nations that they're talking about, or these kings that they were talking about involved in it, were influenced by other people. So I'm gonna say this one more time, and I'm gonna let you go, Sutek. I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna give you I'm gonna prove my point right here. Our brother made a claim when this whole slavery conversation came up on Kofi on the his and Kofi show. He said that Africans was enslaving and trading other Africans before Europeans and Arabs were on the continent. So there was a slave trade and a slave market before the Europeans and the Arabs. We never got a source. It was swept under the rug. He said it twice.
And then they moved to another topic.
And then they moved to another topic. And it was on the fourth discussion that he defined Lovejoy's, or whoever he read from, which he didn't tell y'all who he read from, the source, where he defines slavery from that person's perspective, and then he tries to impose it on Africa. It is at that time where he read that source that he then began to make his argument or say that this is where we at with that. So it went from Africans having a slave market and slave trade before foreigners to, oh man, no, involvement. Now we're talking involvement. Guess what time period we are now in, ladies and gentlemen? The 1500s, the period of the Portuguese and the Arabs already been there.
Damn, that's a long time.
So now the conversation has changed. And if you do not believe me, go look at the show that they did, the end of the show they did over here on our channel, and then the show right after that, and then go listen to all the other shows, and you're going to come up with 4 different arguments on slavery. I didn't do this. Sutek and Unc didn't do this. Chavis didn't do this. Kofi didn't do this. The people who said that y'all was moving the goalpost said that y'all did this. How?
We moving the goalpost though. All them damn claims, and we moving the goalpost.
See, this is why historical context is important. This is why having proper research methodology is important. There's no confusion. They made all that noise, and everybody was watching them and listening, and some people was agreeing with them, and some people was getting mad at me and all of that because I was going against the grain on them, and all Sean them trying to do. No, Sean is trying to tell y'all that these fools is out of their mind. So when I posed the question, show me the slave market and slave trade before the Arab and the European, and Sheffrin politely said, Oh, Sean, you know we ain't got no source that exists like that because we don't get no written documents into the Arabs.
So what is
But
that then?
then, but hold on, He don't get no written. So what the people saying? You just gonna disregard the people in those countries? You don't know what those people saying because somebody documented what those people were saying. Did you not know that? So when he brought up Canaan Barnu, I brought out the people in Canaan Barnu who said they didn't even know who these people was who came down there trying to hijack the land. They came peacefully. First, they came with their military in 666, 667, and then a few years later, they come down there peacefully. But trade was already established, and the presence of Islam was already in Canaan Barnu. And according to Sharia, the law, you had the right to enslave people who didn't practice Islam. And they were heavy into it. The trade route from Canaan Barno to Tripoli shows the path. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me very closely. I said the trade route. How do we know the trade route existed? This was before Arabs was even in the area in 666 and 667. There was a trade route. So when I asked the questions about trade routes, how do we know there was trade routes if we didn't have writing? We knew that they existed. How? Because they had little things that reminded them. They had people already dealing with trade. They were telling people where to go, how to get where they needed to go to get what they wanted. So we know this. We knew trade routes exist. So now we need to know what was going on in those markets, what was being sold. See, demonstration beats conversation in these discussions. And man, I just want to end on that note because we let some people lead us astray. And if we continue to have these lopsided, ignorant barbershop conversations with psychologists, we ain't gonna get nowhere. Because we got one side, when you put them up against an opposing position, they want to ask you a million questions. But when the initial claim was there was a slave market and a slave trade before Arabs and Europeans, where the hell is that information at? We still waiting on that. We 8 days, 12 hours and 52 seconds into that. Still no source. And we still ain't got no context. I don't even know how to undo it over there. But y'all got anything, man? I'm about to slide out of here, man, and leave this digestible hour and 45-minute video for the people who want to rewatch this tomorrow while they working.
Right. Just pay attention to what people say, man. Pay attention to everything because they expose themselves and they're talking long enough. That's all I got to say.
And we will continue our West African history and study on the Massa Warrior Clan YouTube channel. We will pick up tomorrow. I will be penetrating the airwaves tomorrow. Might be tomorrow morning, might be tomorrow around your lunchtime, but I will be penetrating the airwaves with part 2. We will get into part 2 of this video and we're going to walk it out. We're going to do all of that, but we're going to give it historical context and we're going to deal with it the right way. We're not going to come to a conclusion based on a faulty premise. We're going to deal with it and learn from it. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like the show, share the show, tell a friend. But we're muting the noise.
Man, anybody that get mad about research methodology, anybody that get mad about you want to add context, anybody that get mad because you got a problem with them cherry picking or making anecdotal arguments or overgeneralized arguments, you need to run the hell away from that person as fast as you can, man. That's anybody, and that's nothing personal against any one of them, but yeah, man, I can't do it no more.
We anti microwaves, information, scholarship, all that. We anti.
2 incomes are always better than 1.
You can't be a pseudo killer and run from methodology. You can't be a science enthusiast and not use proper research methodology. You just can't do it. Science requires you to know and to do. And in the knowing and doing, you have to advance scholarship, and you are inappropriately misrepresenting science. Peace.